My name is Ashik Siddque. I'm co-chair of Democratic Socialists of America, which is the largest socialist organization in the United States. The left has been, pretty weak and small in the United States for a long time, but DSA is growing very quickly over the past decade. We now have 80,000 members all over the country and 200 chapters in all 50 states. So we're contesting power at every level of government that we can get organized. We are organizing with labor unions and social movements to try to, build an alternative to this two-party system in the United States that's, wreaked havoc around the world, made life worse for working class people all over the world, no, not least in the United States. So we have a big task ahead of us, but we have a lot of exciting stuff happening, even in a dark time in the United States. So I was born and raised in New York City in Brooklyn. My parents immigrated from Bangladesh in the 1980s. So I grew up in New York City, which is, a very multicultural city. I went to public schools, and I was, gradually politicized, for a lot of reasons, but especially after 9/11. I was just a preteen when 9/11 happened, and I saw the ways that Muslim Americans especially were scapegoated and targeted by, surveillance and just, this whole national security, homeland security apparatus grew after 9/11, and it was used to expand surveillance and control over populations that could be othered in the United States, and that was used to expand the war on terror. So just seeing the ways that the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan expanded, seeing people in my community be targeted, gradually helped politicize me. When Obama was elected in 2008, it was refreshing to have a break from George Bush's administration, and then a lot of people, including me, were hopeful that there could be a meaningful change in policy, but we saw how there really wasn't. The war on terror still expanded. Deportations, targeting of immigrants, that also expanded throughout Obama's administration. So it was during that time that I really became, started to try to figure out what it meant to politically organize, and realizing there needed to be alternatives. So there were waves of social movements in those years, like Occupy Wall Street happened the year after I finished college. I had a lot of student debt after I finished university, so there are a lot of things that people of my generation, millennials, really experienced in those years after the 2008 economic crisis. Just really losing faith in the political establishment, and seeing the ways that life was getting harder for us, and understanding that this was an outcome of many decades of American policy, under both parties, like a bipartisan consensus that was just making life worse in the United States and for people across the world. So I was very excited when Bernie Sanders ran for president the first time in 2016. I was a volunteer for his campaign. I also got involved in climate organizing against the climate crisis. So there are all these things that helped politicize me to the left and start to see myself as a socialist, and understanding that there was a long history of the left in the United States and around the world that we could recover and build, that represented a real alternative. So I joined DSA in January 2017. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time. And, when Trump got elected the first time, it was a time of great fear. But DSA was an organization on the ground that was, showing up to rallies and protests. And, we were figuring out together how to organize a real alternative. So I learned how to organize in general, politically through DSA, and just understanding what democratic socialism means, and the continuity with working people's movements around the world. So DSA grew really quickly in those years, and I just that became my political home. And I connected with many people across the country, and from people in left parties around the world. It's been really enriching to understand what it takes to build power against the ruling class, the capitalist class. We're learning a lot from parties like in Morena in Mexico, from the PT in Brazil, and understanding what it took to build those parties. We have a lot of ground to recover in the United States. DSA is a very young organization. Most of our members, I would say, are certainly under the age of 40. But we kind of lost a generation of two of people on the left who could teach us how to organize this alternative. So we're very eager to learn from everybody else. For us, it's I've learned so much about the political history of the left in the United States, which really was very actively suppressed after World War II. There was a very active Red Scare that suppressed not just socialist and communist organizations, but labor unions that were very strong were weakened over time, and it was a very active effort, by the state, by business interests to suppress that. But it, a lot of us learned how pretty much any social movement gains of the past century, whether it was civil rights, the civil rights movement of the 60s and 70s, the environmental movement, women's rights, all the gains of the New Deal in the 1930s, which really expanded economic opportunities for the working class. All of these were possible because there was an organized left and there was a very strong labor movement. So we really see our task as recovering that. We need to rebuild the labor movement in the United States. We need to rebuild left organization, working class organization, and it has to be mass organization. We have to organize, millions of people. So the left, there have been a lot of small left organizations since the 60s and 70s, but they've been pretty, limited in impact. They've been pretty marginal. So DSA, as we are growing very quickly, we want to learn from what the challenges of of organizing for the previous century. For the past decade, I think millions of Americans are seeing how, the Republicans keep moving further and further to the right, and the Democrats have not been any kind of meaningful opposition. They're really just capitulating to that move to the right. They're enabling it further, especially on immigration. The Republicans have totally scapegoated and targeted immigrants, and Democrats have reinforced that logic. Kamala Harris ran on, strong borders. But people, if they're motivated by that, they're just going to go for the purest version of that, the most reactionary version. They'll just keep voting to the right. So there's this kind of ratcheting that's happening to the right, and Democrats have enabled that. But that's leaving millions of people who've been part of the Democratic voting base, they're kind of falling out, and that showed in the election last year, where millions of people who had voted for Joe Biden 4 years ago or had voted Democrat in the past just are checking out. Most of them are just not even voting. Some of them did vote for Trump. So yeah, there's a real hunger for an alternative, and I think where DSA is building a base, we're showing what that alternative is. So the best example of that right now is Zohran Mamdani, who hopefully will become mayor of New York City in November, and he has been communicating directly to the types of people who have been left out by Democrats, and he did a lot to communicate in the weeks right after the election in November to talk to people in working class neighborhoods of New York City and in the Bronx and Queens, mostly immigrant and Black communities who actually did swing toward Trump in greater numbers than had ever voted Republican before. And he just talked to them, on the street. He made great videos just asking, did you vote? Like many of them didn't, or some of them did vote for Trump. And all of them talked about cost of living. They talked about seeing how all this government funding was going to militarism, to support genocide in Gaza or Ukraine or whatever, and they were seeing how social services are being cut here in New York City, here in the United States. So he's communicating directly to people's needs. He's campaigning on just very basic demands like fast and free buses, expanding public transit, universal childcare, freezing the rent, and controlling the cost of living with municipal grocery stores that help food be more affordable. So just these very basic needs, and that's really resonating with people. He's really showing what the alternative is, and just conveying a sense of optimism and just what is possible. Like another kind of society is possible in the United States, and he comes from an immigrant background. He talks about that. And it's not just about identity representation, which is something that Democrats have used a lot, just people of particular identities getting elected and then, kind of just trying to coast on that. He's saying, yeah, I come from this background, but it's about what I'm for. And, I'm for these universal policies for working class people. And my experience as an immigrant helps me, empathize with everybody else. And New York City, America is, talked about as a nation of immigrants, but that's immigrants are more easily exploited. And this is something that the way he talks in his campaign, just really bringing people in and helping people understand that we can organize together. And we have to, we can't just get somebody elected and hope for the best. There has to be ongoing organization. So the coalition that helped elect him are labor unions in New York City, immigrant groups that organize immigrants as workers, as tenants, And these organizations that have been doing work on the ground for years represent a new coalition that has not been represented in the political system. So there are many demographics of people like my family's from Bangladesh. There are a lot of Bangladeshi New Yorkers, a lot of Arabs, Palestinians, um, who've been left out of the political system, but have been organizing in their communities and now represent a base that the establishment didn't notice. There are many African immigrants. Mexicans obviously are the largest immigrant population in America, and I think in New York City. He connected with Latino immigrants in New York City. He campaigned in almost every language that's spoken, putting out videos in Spanish and Arabic and Chinese and Bangla, and that helped him connect. And people feel respected. That he's talking about these universal issues, and he's going to each community and speaking their language. And that's something that we haven't really seen, such a multicultural campaign in New York City or in the United States in a very long time. What Trump represents is really dark. This is there's organized. This is an organized fascist movement. The far right behind Trump is, they have a global vision. They're connected with, obviously the Zionist politics, like what is motivating the state of Israel to commit a genocide in Gaza. All the far right governments throughout Europe and Latin America are directly connected. Like they have a similar vision of very small elite that is able to continue hoarding resources, cut social services, government resources, and exterminate populations that are seen as extra. So the way that the Palestinians are treated is similar to how indigenous people are treated across Latin America by right-wing governments. The way that the right wing in the United States has, the United States is built on slavery and extermination of indigenous people, and this is a history that they're increasingly explicit about bringing back. Like they're talking about manifest destiny in a way that hasn't been talked about openly in the United States in many generations. Like when I was growing up in school, we learned about manifest destiny and colonialism as something that happened in the past, and it's over. Now we're in a more progressive liberal era of equal rights for everybody. That's become less and less true, and they're more openly white supremacist. I think some government department just tweeted this image of manifest destiny, like a white angelic woman, standing over like white armies, pushing indigenous people away. So this is an iconic image of settler colonialism from the 19th century that's now being openly referenced by people in this government. So that's very dark. It's scary, but so far we are seeing a lot of popular resistance. We're seeing a lot of not just the base of the Democratic Party, but a lot of people who have not been politicized are reacting against this. And I think a lot of people who have voted for the Democratic Party are seeing that the establishment of that party is not up to the task, and that makes them more open to the left. Like the coalition that Zoran represents in New York City includes many liberals, people who have, who might have been critical of Bernie Sanders when he ran for president, but are now seeing that there really is no alternative. They're seeing how, the heads of the Democratic Party, whether it's Chuck Schumer or Hakeem Jeffries or Nancy Pelosi, they're not really, they're just giving in, and they're even saying like, well, there's nothing we can do. So the type of campaign that Zoran is running, but not just in New York City, in most major cities in America now, DSA has some presence. Like in Los Angeles, we have 4 city council members out of, I think, 15 or 16. So almost a quarter of the city council are socialists. And they are the ones who are out there defending the rights of immigrants, who are, taking measures to make Los Angeles a sanctuary city that's even stronger, supporting communities that are targeted by ICE raids. So people see who is really standing up for marginalized people, but also for everybody's rights. We're growing in part because people see that, the most vulnerable people, like certain communities, are being targeted as scapegoats, but there's the understanding that, well, they're being targeted first, but more and more people will be targeted. So whether it's migrants or trans people or whoever, like these are just the test cases. And meanwhile, they're stripping all of our social services. They're increasing military budgets. They're increasing domestic surveillance. The ICE budget is, now larger than most militaries in the world. So, people see what direction that's going in, and they want an alternative. So that's what we're fighting to represent. And we know it's a big task, but we see, we see what's happening in Mexico, where Claudia Sheinbaum is able to be directly communicating an alternative to Trump's politics. Meanwhile, Mexico is expanding your high-speed rail, expanding the production of domestic goods that support the rights of workers. So, we see these things happening. We're able to point to these as, things that governments are capable of doing. And when people hear about it in the United States, they support, things that make people's lives better. So, it's a dark time, but it's also, we're able to point to specific reasons for hope and optimism, and we just have to keep organizing more people into making it possible. We're not blind to the dangers. We know there's a long history of people on the left being targeted, but for us, this really emphasizes the need to be doing mass politics. We know that there's power in numbers. We know that majorities of people, when polled or when asked, support what we stand for. So for us, this is a time to organize and reach as many people as possible, and that's where safety comes from. And the Trump administration so far, they they seem to be overreaching in certain ways, like they're going after protesters. There are cases like, Palestinian protesters like Mahmoud Khalil or Ramesh Turk. They were detained by ICE, which is, beyond the stated scope, right? Like, it's supposed to be about border enforcement, which we know is nonsense, but they're going after people who dissent, and that they were not able to make that stick, like they had to release them after a certain amount of time, shows that when there's enough popular resistance, enough opposition, they can't make these policies, this type of targeting stick. So, it's a question of mass organization. So that's what we're really focusing on. We're not about, just elevating individuals to be leaders of movements. We believe in collective democracy. So we want to activate as many people as possible to be leaders in their communities, and that's where our power comes from. So, they can't just target individuals and then expect to end a movement. We are continuing to grow because we're bringing more and more people into it and understand that they are the agents of change.